Hello, everybody, and welcome on behalf of me, Joyce Kulhawick, and my husband, Andrew Cohen, to our living room, which my husband, the architect, designed with precisely this kind of event in mind. Just big parties on a stage where we celebrate what's near and dear to us. So I just want to say welcome to family, friends, students, colleagues, those in person and those near and dear who are tuning in right now on our webinar. Welcome to this celebration and launch of Come Thunder with this fabulous picture of Barbara. Come Thunder by the extraordinary woman who launched so many of us, Barbara Helfgott Hyett. Hi, Bobby. I know you'll be tuning in. Here's a big round of applause and much love for you. I will actually never forget the first time I met Barbara Helfgott Hyett, and I'm sure all of you have some kind of story, but we were both English teachers at Brookline High School, and I was 24 years old and at the very beginning of my life and career, while Barbara's life and career were really in full swing. My life hadn't taken shape yet. Barbara already had a family. She had two beautiful boys, and she was a dynamo in the classroom. She was legendary as a teacher. I was instantly drawn to Barbara, this brilliant woman with masses of wildly curly auburn hair who came into school every day wearing black. And it turns out Barbara was in the middle of a very turbulent time in her life, attending one funeral after another for many of her relatives, too many of her relatives, who passed away that fall in a very short period of time. And it seemed to me that this was more than any one person should be able to bear. And yet this was actually just a glimpse of the life-altering, profound, tragic, comic, serendipitous, revelatory experiences that Barbara would navigate in the wide world and then share through the force of her personality, her enormous, generous spirit, and her remarkable voice. We may have met as teachers, as colleagues next to each other, but like what happened with so many of us, Barbara became my teacher. She gave me the courage to find my own voice in the world, and it's with me every day. And to find your voice, of course, is to find yourself. I would not be who I am without having Barbara in my life or my being lucky enough to be part of her very large world. Many people will speak today about their experiences, what they know of Barbara, and the remarkable work she's turned out. Several people are going to share their voices this afternoon, and among the first is Alexis Ivy, a 2018 recipient of the Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship in Poetry and the author of Romance with Small-Time Crooks and Taking the Homeless Census, which won the 2018 Saturnalia Editors Prize. She is an advocate for the homeless in Cambridge. She began studying under Barbara's Poem Works in 2002, and she now teaches in the Poem Works community. But first, we will hear from the woman of the hour in her own voice, reading the first poem from Come Thunder on video, which she did in one take, much to our surprise and gratification. Here is Barbara Helfgott Hyett reading her poem, Lightkeeper's Daughter.
Lightkeeper's daughter. Blinded by salt, she went out into it, hand to the window with a rag, vinegar, pale heft, tumult, while her brother, warm enough in the stairwell, played. The catwalk held as she turned away. The light turned in its nest. Clockwork, the whole world a semaphore of sound. Her heart was a chapel in that dark, a love so big it scared her. Her hair fell, ice by sea, wild as fire and full of the spit of life. Brave she was, and leaned on herself out there, light sending out its own raw warning, red, red, white.
All night the waves. 1. My name is bedtime. Everything is on my floor. All night the waves. All night the shouting. I am alone among everything on the floor. My small bed, my M&Ms. I am alone, or maybe there's a bear, stuffed flatly, not growling, but a kind of motorized grind from behind his red felt lips. My name is Sleepy. The bear will not be quiet. My parents forget me from the living room. 2. My name is Morning. On my street, all the doors are open. Sometimes they're closed. Sometimes there are no grown-ups all day. We have no keys. Nothing of mine breaks here. The doors are solid firmament, and all the keyholes stars. The keyholes kneel to see themselves. The sea breathes every hour. I keep a plaid umbrella on my doorknob. Sometimes I borrow. Sometimes I make a poem of my life. It's great to be here today among people who love and admire Barbara Helfgott Hyett as a poet and a person. It has been an honor to be a part of her writing process as she has and continues to form my identity as a poet and a person. She helped me find my voice, so it is a privilege to carry on her voice and legacy by being her reader. The poems I chose to share with you today are full of Barbara's personal history, showing the humanity and courage within her, line break, poetic artistry. She comes to her final collection with selfhood. She always said poetry saved her life. The poems in Come Thunder affirm that doctrine. So I'm going to keep going with the first chapter, which is Atlantic City. I never said I love you best. I suffered beside them, the two bears my mother pushed to one side of my pillow because they crowd the bed. I was just wanting to sleep between them. I worried who to bring closest to my ear, who to leave by the headboard. I loved Squeaky best, the oldest and barely still brown. So much more did I love him. But Reddy, Carnival Prize, my brother won for me. Reddy, who was neither soft nor pretty. How I pitied him and dared not hurt his feelings. I tried to stay awake, denying my dreams their outcome, and longed for Squeaky. Still, I talked to Reddy. I love you, I told him. Now go to sleep. Sometimes he would, and sometimes he wouldn't, since he couldn't really trust me. High wire. Oh, the dying are such acrobats. Deborah Diggs. When my mother joined the circus, she played slide piano under the big top, learned tumbling from the Spanish family. Could roll and roll as if forever. Lunchtime, we'd marvel at the fire eaters, and Tattoo Man would muscle the crescent moon for me. Then she'd practice swinging on the trapeze. Sometimes I'd dance beneath her on the sawdust, or have to climb up part way, talk her down. She was not quite fit for balance. I could see that. Once I heard the bareback rider say, the fat lady ought to stay on the ground. Nights in our car on the circus train, I'd wash her feet for her, rub them dry. I wasn't happy. I wasn't really sad. Relieved, I guess, or shy to be that close to my mother. In our bed, I'd wall my pillow between us, listen to the horses sway like spun gold. I had to learn to fend the lions off, had to learn to love them. Report card. Barbara is not a good citizen. Miss Bloom wrote, "Aren't I the one who helps the others in cursive writing? Don't I always stand as proud as a flagpole on the auditorium stage on Veterans Day? Isn't that American enough? I am first lieutenant of safety patrol, first girl ever to hold the post. Busiest corner, Massachusetts Avenue and Pacific, spreading my arms out like gulls' wings. I glue my eyes to the light. Red, yellow, me standing the tallest by green. Snap and I turn sideways, waving my starched gold button gloved hand for the other school children to cross. Sometimes I have to count on Nick, the traffic cop, to stop a city bus for me. The whole world waiting and I, the law's white harness, girl with the spit shine badge. When I say go, everyone goes." Lifeguard. The ice cream man who trudged the beach, box roughly strapped by leather across his chest, dropped sweetness at our feet, let dry ice steam into the sky. I'd always buy an orange popsicle on account of not really knowing ice cream. We didn't have a proper freezer in our fridge. Time to swim to the pole that used to be the dock of the Grand Hotel. I floated for a while out there, then swam back in, was talking when the lifeguard called me over to his stand. "Hey, Barbara, do you make out?" "Of course," I said, not thinking, just wondering a little what make out meant. Could she tell my mother if I let the lifeguard kiss me? I want him to kiss me. He said he'd bring a beach towel for a pillow. I'd never shared a pillow with a boy. The sand was warm. I was new and starving for his tongue. I was 13. It was the summer that my father died. My mother, crazy nearly, and the beach chair people still wouldn't talk to me. I didn't know the stars then, didn't know the hung on the sea moon. Afraid I was to look out, unready to know. Comic books. I read comic books, and I was the hero of comic books, Elvis Presley. I read comic books to learn how to live my life. Huey, Dewey, and Louie hooked an umbrella handle to the blue absolute of the sky buoying them sufficient so they could swim. I loved especially little Lulu, officious, bossy, able to hold her chin high, even though she had no neck. Strange things were possible. Every ugh and guh over Bluto's head, dispatched by a can of spinach in Popeye's fist. Whoever was bad stayed bad. Good was always good, not like in the books where the tragic was sure to happen and a kind person could turn mean in the next chapter. I was a nervous child whose true heroics came at bedtime, roaches scuttling the floorboards inside my walls. Nonetheless, I'd make myself fall asleep. In the morning, there'd be Mickey smiling beside my pillow, implacably, inevitably. And Jiminy Cricket fooling himself into fearlessness by whistling. And motherless Dumbo still flying, and motherless Bambi filling the frame of the forest. Even Superman was motherless, however disguised. I scrutinized their painted expressions, clouds above them carrying their every word. They said what they'd do, then did. They could be whatever they'd say, their attributes running ahead of them, one square box at a time. A world not so much of confidence, but regularity, the geometry of their noses and ears, their every locution an exclamation, bravado in every intent. I loved the accumulation of comic books piled on my one bookshelf, the shining covers, the 2-cents used democratic paper, the pages that smelled so good, accessible, and satisfying. I came to comic books the way I came to every pleasure, hopeful, expecting everyone to somehow show up next issue, gullible or square-jawed, setting out again, unchanged, a world of meek adventures, and the motto, first you fail, then you get redeemed. I'm going to go to the third chapter of the book, which is entitled Proof of the Spinning World. Things in their disorder. Toss a stone, and you will never be able to stop that fire. You may have meant nothing by it. You wanted only the toss, not the tension, not the twinge, unrealized, unnecessary. That release, that error in judgment is God. Poem at Split Rock Cove. Brush fire, watching fire as it were sunrise yellowing. Say what you see, says the fire. I study the beach, rockweed tangled in stones, pull at the barnacles attached to the stones. I squeeze bulbous seeds that refuse to yield. Resist, the rockweed cries from the daily apocalypse. Hold to things slow and hard, says the tide. Believe in the hard, says the hard. The people in chairs sit on. A whale blows in the harbor, lifts its life without us in mind. Nothing is as it seems, not the five who stare at fire, not tide loudly lapping the fishing pier, not the ladders, not even the pile of empty lobster traps, not expecting a thing at all, though the painted peeled buoy is bobbing. Be fair, says the buoy. Look again, says the sky. Last evening, attention must be paid, Arthur Miller. It didn't merit celebration, just that I decided to sleep in the bed again and rose in darkness from the reading chair, performed some ablutions, then pulled back the covers and sat down on the sheets. I lifted my legs, slid under the covers, turned off the bed light, lay for a while, the pillow surprising my hair, faced the ceiling without thought or merit. Trucks come and go in the street. I smile a little, or I don't. I sense the armoire of my body, seek the key. Have rest come like unwilling children called home before dark. Faced right, faced left, and soon it was tomorrow. I swear I wanted to celebrate my return to the customary, but was unaccustomed to self-congratulation, so rose quickly into the new day. In this note to myself, without forethought or erasure, I declare that I have changed. The Cliffs, Trinity Bay, Newfoundland. Because my friend said, "Let me show you," we drove for miles of unpaved road until the shale and rocks stopped us, roughly. The sea was gray and spackled. Summer buttoned my sweater red. We had come to the green end of the world. Earth was the equation, and there were flowers, wild, crazy blossoms spun from a single stalk. We lay on the juniper to watch for whales. I lay here naked once, she whispered, beside my shy husband. I grew still in respect for her sorrow until a foghorn flooded the oceanic roar. Horizon was an imagined island rising. Ice battered the coast's invisible tide. Nothing beyond, only out and far were all. The last poem I'm going to read is the last poem of the collection, Proof of the Spinning World, on the Provincetown Ferry. What I want is lightning as we whip the turn from good to wild, and seabirds, every one shining, low flying the trammel of clams, the whole blue-black swath as one, at once, breaking the dusk like a bell, crying out their strange elation among the mackerel clouds, the air a monolith, a creed. I stand watchful on the upmost deck while the sky bruises, red sun leaning into hard, audible rain. Come thunder, and thrill sets in. The moon slips out, silvered, sultry, that kind of otherwise beauty, and in the face of it, a certain callousness. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexis, for so truly channeling Barbara's voice. Our next speaker is Barbara's publisher. Eileen Cleary is a hospice nurse and teaches college writing at Wentworth Institute of Technology. She is the author of Child Ward of the Commonwealth 2019, which received an honorable mention for the Sheila Margaret Moughton Book Prize, and 2 a.m. with Keats. She co-edited the anthology Voices Amidst the Virus, featured at the 2021 Michigan State University Filmetry Festival, and is the editor-in-chief of Lily Poetry Review Books and Lily Poetry Review. Her recent work is included in Tree Lines, 21st Century American Poetry, just out through Grayson Books. Please welcome Eileen Cleary.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to have a chance to speak to what I think distinguishes Barbara as a person and poet, and why Lily Poetry Review Books enthusiastically published her crowning achievement in verse, Come Thunder. Barbara Helfgott Hyett aimed her considerable talents and creative energies toward amplifying others' voices her entire life, and toward practical and lofty applications of steering her students toward publication, residencies, public readings, and university writing programs. She did this joyously for years at her table, where she willingly sacrificed time from her own writing to benefit hundreds of others. She wanted to give them community, a sense of purpose and pride. She didn't run a workshop or workshops. She opened her table and her life, living in part for her students, giving them poetic tools, yes, but also empowering them as people, generously turning starfish into sea stars for so many of us. Hundreds of poets teach poetry, but not everyone lives for their students as she did. She befriended and honored them. She loved them. For Lily, it wasn't a decision to publish Come Thunder. It was a quest, an actualization of a dream. We wanted to publish a book of Barbara's because we believe as much as she did in truth and in beauty. She observed the world keenly, empathetically, without blinking. She was capable of translating that vision to the page. Such poets are the light that makes seeing easy. They are the voices who hear a blue kind of softening in the world and lead us to it. All people who read and write enough poetry realize that verse exists in the perennial now. Poems flatten time and space, and poets call to one another across borders, generations, cultures, across the language of their birth. Lily Poetry Review Books publishes Barbara Helfgott Hyett so that she can continue to converse in the now with Keats and all of the greats across the world, in truth and in beauty, and with her students, who translate some of their own greatness in print now because of her dedication. Thank you.
Yes, so right now, this is a little unusual, but right now we're going to play the interview that I did with Barbara a few weeks ago, which was pretty remarkable. I don't know how many of you have actually heard the interview already. I would say Adam, our remarkable editor and videographer here today. Big round of applause for Adam. made that interview sing, did an incredible job editing that. Right now, at this point in the webinar, that is going to play. So shall we wait for that to happen, or will you just edit that in? No, let's do it. Okay. Can we hear it? Okay. We'll just imagine. She is still Barbara. Barbara. Yes. I have many questions about the book, but I understand you chose this photograph of you. Tell me how old you are here and where was that taken?
At my mother's photo shop.
Wow. How old were you? About
11.
Yeah, you look to be about 11. Why did you choose this photo for this Atlantic City collection?
I don't remember.
As you look at it, what do you think of? Do you remember that time?
I look like I'm 11.
Yeah. Tell me about your growing up in Atlantic City. What do you remember about that time?
I had fun.
Yeah. You look really happy. Really happy. I love that bathing suit. Do you remember where that was taken?
My mother's little shop on the boardwalk.
Wow. So that's so this is not the ocean behind you. That's like a drawing or a painting? Photoshop. I love it. Tell me about the poem, Lightkeeper's Daughter. And what is that poem about?
My brother and me. Say it's a very sad poem.
What makes it sad?
I can't say.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It's pretty.
Yeah. It's a beautiful poem. So tell me about your childhood in Atlantic City.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. What did you love about it?
The boardwalk.
What did you do on the boardwalk?
Get splinters.
Do you have a poem about splinters in here?
I don't think so.
Maybe not those kind of splinters, other kinds of splinters, maybe. Who were your friends in Atlantic City?
Janice. My friend Janice.
And your brother? Ira. Yeah. What did you used to do with Ira in Atlantic City?
He took care of me when he was 9 years older.
And your mother had a photography shop?
She worked there in the summers.
You used to tell me all the time about monarch butterflies. What do you love about monarch butterflies?
They're so beautiful.
They are. But the cocoon, what can you tell me about that?
You watch it. And then it turns into a beautiful butterfly.
Yes. Kind of like this book. It turned into a beautiful butterfly. What you look like today.
Thank you.
Very moving to talk to Barbara and just be with her. She is still very much herself, as you can see. Our next two speakers, Kathleen Aguero has published 6 books of poetry, her most recent being World Happiness Index from Tiger Bark Press. She has also co-edited 3 volumes of multicultural literature for the University of Georgia Press. She teaches in the Solstice Low Residency MFA program and in Changing Lives Through Literature, an alternative sentencing program, and is a consulting poetry editor at Kenyon Review. We also have Richard Hoffman, who is the author of 7 books, among them 4 poetry collections: Without Paradise, Gold Star Road, which received the 2009 Sheila Motten Book Prize from the New England Poetry Club, Emblem, and Noon Until Night, which won the 2018 Massachusetts Book Award. Please welcome Kathleen Aguero, followed by Richard Hoffman. Let me see.
Is this good? I'm so short. I always have to adjust the mic. So many thanks to Eileen, Alexis, Eric, and Barbara's longtime treasured friend Joyce for bringing the book into the world and for hosting this celebration. Eric asked me to speak about Barbara's legacy, and she's given us a very rich one as friend, mentor, and literary figure whose poetry deserves far more attention than it has received so far. Eileen spoke a lot about Barbara as a teacher, so I won't go over that, but I'm sure many of you have heard her insist this should be 2 poems, right? Make it 2 poems and cut this, this, and this. And you know what? Usually she was right. Always she was right. Barbara and I first met at a Massachusetts Council of the Arts gathering, and she introduced herself to me, saying we'd both had poems published in the same issue of Sojourner, the women's Boston newspaper, and voila, we became friends. That was it with Barbara. You met her, you were her friends. And she's been an incredibly good personal friend and poetry colleague. She basically ordered the poems in 2 of my collections. I brought her the manuscripts. She put them on her dining room table and looked at them and said, okay, this one, that has something about a seal in it too, not this one, that's too close. And it was like magic. Then they were ordered. I've been agonizing over it. I think she did it in 20 or 25 minutes, and people always told me how they loved the order of those 2 books. So I really missed her guidance when I was struggling to put my most recent book together. In considering Barbara's poetic legacy, I reviewed all the books that she's written, but it began to seem like a panel presentation or PhD thesis, so I'll spare you all of that, but I suggest you do it. It's just remarkable to see how her poetry has grown, and it was always really good to begin with. All her work is painstakingly crafted in a way that requires her to look closely not only at language, but to examine herself and the ethics of the world we live in. I know that Richard's going to speak a little bit about In Evidence, the book that came from her interviews with the GIs who liberated the camps. But I just want to say writing that book took a tremendous psychic and emotional toll on Barbara. But she persisted because she believes that poetry is a moral obligation as well as an aesthetic one. And for that, I have the greatest admiration. And she's certainly as demanding on herself as she is on her students. For example, she did a tremendous amount of research for both The Tracks We Leave and The Double Reckoning of Christopher Columbus. And as we know, Barbara does nothing halfway, nothing shoddily. So in the preface to The Tracks We Leave, she writes, I prescribed for myself a course of study, first reading all the classical natural histories, and that was only part of her preparation. And then to write The Double Reckoning of Christopher Columbus, she read his diaries and logbooks, studied nautical science, acquainted herself with the books Columbus read, and traveled to Portugal, Spain, and the Canary Islands, which I envy her. That must have been fun. But both of these books, as I was reading along, also represent sort of stylistic breakthroughs or experiments. In The Tracks We Leave, fragments of a long lyric describing the poet's relationship to nature and her tender observations of a you, another person interacting with nature, are interspersed throughout the poems that deal with specific species. And I remember Barbara puzzling. She really wanted to include that long lyric poem, but she couldn't figure out how to do it because the tone was so different. So she decided to break it up and just kind of, scatter it throughout the book. And people do that now, but at the time, that was incredibly innovative. And then, so to create the right tone for the Christopher Columbus book, she decided she would write in iambic pentameter because that would be appropriate for the historic setting. And so she told me, so that she could get the iambic pentameter in her head naturally, she would walk to BU to teach and either recite in her head, I think, maybe she did it out loud, lines of iambic pentameter and make herself think in iambic pentameter. So the amount of work and research, her curiosity and intelligence and passion that went into each book was just phenomenal. And then finally, the book we're celebrating today, Come Thunder. And Barbara, I hope you'll forgive me for using a cliche, but that title is so appropriate because I was thunderstruck by this book, really. because in it you can see the way she pulls together all of her previous themes and applies the incredible artistry and craft she's learned writing her previous books to create something truly extraordinary. She trusts herself to pare the poems down to their essence. And she trusts herself that she's done a good enough job of it that her readers will be able to follow her poetic voice. She also revisits a lot of the themes from earlier books. As I was reading Come Thunder, I thought, wait, I've read this poem before, it's familiar. But I hadn't read it. It was familiar because she went back to the poems in Atlantic City and The Tracks We Leave and looked at them in a radically different way and wrote about them in a radically different way. And I think that's an incredibly daring thing to do. To illustrate the transformation, I was going to read the two poems, but some of you have already heard The Lightkeeper's Daughter. But if you have her books and you compare Climbing the Lighthouse in Natural Law, which was her 1989 book, to The Lightkeeper's Daughter, the change is astounding. They are both good poems, but The Lightkeeper's Daughter is just a huge leap. I fell and broke my nose and had a concussion early this month, and so I couldn't read or go online. And so I decided I'd listen to an audiobook. And so I listened to the new Sylvia Plath biography, Red Comet, which I haven't finished yet. It's 45 hours of listening. But, Plath writes all these wonderful poems, and then at the end, she just takes off. She's on fire. No matter how good her other poems were, the ones in Ariel are something different. And that's the way I feel about Come Thunder. I really think it's an extraordinary, extraordinary book. So what is Barbara's legacy? And I hope that I haven't made her, with all her studying and research, seem too earnest or studious, because if you know Barbara and her work, both are filled with joy, love of life and its creatures, but she was very serious about poetry and what it could do. She was really committed to it, and that's her legacy. Her commitment to poetry, to perfecting it so it can most effectively and elegantly deliver its truths, her incredible integrity, and her ability to create a community of poets and poetry readers who celebrate and support one another. And so I'm so glad we're here together celebrating her. And of course, her legacy is laughter, adventure, trying on one another's clothes and borrowing stuff, oohing and ahhing over one another's children and grandchildren. Her rich legacy is truly to be treasured. So I'm so glad we're having this celebration.
Hi, everyone. I don't know where to begin. This is a 40-year friendship, and I came to know Barbara first through Kathy, and later as a poet and colleague. We were teaching colleagues, among other things, and Barbara, her generosity has already been mentioned, but her generosity to me involved getting me gigs when I wasn't teaching full time. One of them was a gig at Harvard teaching teachers. It was the Teachers as Scholars program that Harvard ran for a number of years. And then she got me this summer gig at Holy Cross in Worcester, which was a gasp, literally, because we drove there on the Mass Pike every day, and it is the time when I feel like I became closest to Barbara. It was just the two of us in that car. And you may recall there used to be these things called toll booths, right? And there was, so we would always head for this one lane that said "nothing in tow" over it. Well, that expression "nothing in tow" became a private language between the two of us. It could mean, of course, I've got nothing to hide, I got nothing in tow, or that you'd been liberated from some great weight, hey, nothing in tow. Or sometimes it was like, that guy's got nothing in tow, like he's not bringing it, there's nothing there. And so we had this little private language that went back and forth. I think Barbara's course at the time at Holy Cross was called writing poems that know more than you do, which sums up a lot of Barbara's approach to poetry and the reasons to write it. And mine was called the ninth letter of the alphabet because I was only teaching memoir. Nevertheless, I stole from Barbara, this is a confession, I stole from her an exercise that I used for the next 25 years with my memoir classes that I named Starting from Solitude. Some of you may have done this exercise in workshops of hers, where you find a place where you, as a character, I, are alone, and you ask, where's the source of light? What can I hear from this? And it really roots you in a particular moment. And I stole that and adapted it to first-person nonfiction. Truth and beauty have come up several times, and some of you know that those were the names of Barbara's cats, Truth and Beauty, you know. Truth would wait under the sofa and then slice your ankles as you went by, and Beauty would climb the curtain and need to get down. I think that Barbara is an example of what is essential in American poetry. What's essential about it is its responsiveness to the contemporary world. It isn't an academic pursuit. It was never that for her. It isn't for those of us who are connected to her. It's an essential art because it doesn't need backers. It doesn't need producers. It doesn't need theaters. It doesn't need equipment. It needs a pencil and a piece of paper and an imagination. Among her other contributions to the art, and this has been mentioned by Kathy, is her ability to indicate the massive by attending to the minuscule, and to write poems that are public poems, but only because they're true and beautiful. I'm thinking of those poems in Evidence that were fashioned from interviews with former soldiers who'd liberated the Nazi death camps. It's hard to imagine what could be more personal than those voices, the voices she curated in those poems. Now, I'm going to say something controversial. In the poetry world, which seems sometimes to run on envy as its fuel, there was, when those poems came out, I would hear in the community, but she didn't really write those. She transcribed them. That's not a real book of poems. She didn't really write those. So as if curating those voices was a piece of cake, as if featuring them in a particular way so that they could get in under our rib cage and not just in our heads was not the work of the poet. And again, coming from the nonfiction world, I can say that she was way ahead of the Nobel Prize winner, Alexis Ivy, who did exactly that in curating the voices from Chernobyl and curating the voices of returning Russian soldiers from Afghanistan, etc. So in that way, Barbara was also a pioneer. It was in terms of reaching out and bringing things into her work that were not coming from her own personal experience, but nevertheless were both personal and public and political in the largest sense. Or you could take her book, The Tracks We Leave, which I would assert makes her one of the earliest eco-poets in American poetry. Again, she makes no sweeping statements about the environment or the climate crisis or extinctions or about caring for our fellow creatures. She just cares for them by attending to who and what they truly are. To create essential work like that requires, first of all, integrity. an integrity that resists every easy formulation, every pat response, that resists the temptation to play to the crowd. And Barbara knew very well what the contemporary poetry scene was. But that was the essence of Barbara's aesthetic, was the aesthetic of refusal, the refusal of the inauthentic, of the formulaic, the expected, the comfortable. Posterity is a hard sell these days. The world's changing so fast, and our arts are all tied up with electronic technologies that are evolving faster, sometimes it seems, than we are, at least people my age. But vertical time is still real, time measured in generations and eras. And I have no doubt that with the help of this crowning achievement, Come Thunder, Barbara's work will take its rightful place in whatever is understood to be the American poetry of this time. And that rightful place is as an exemplar, a poet and teacher of poets whose influence has been and will continue to be deep and wide. I think that's about all I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you so much, Kathy. Yes, I think Come Thunder will reverberate, no doubt about that. And yes, I'm of course aware of Keats's Truth and Beauty, which has been referred to so much during today's recollections and also in Barbara's poetry, but I also knew those two cats. And it is true that sometimes truth is hiding and will leap out and slice you at the ankles. That is certainly true. So thank you. I can't help but think that there's one enveloping quality that I think precedes perhaps all of the other things that I think about Barbara, and I know her primarily as a friend, as a woman, as a person whose life evolved and changed along with mine over decades and decades. And it seems to me that Barbara's supreme gift was something that preceded all of her other abilities, her abilities to teach people. Clearly, she had the poetic tools, as somebody referred to them. But before having or being able to employ the poetic tools, Barbara had to be so attentive to us, to the voices she was going to nurture. She had to believe that what we had to say was worth saying. And her intense belief in us as people, her intense attention to the quality of what we might have to offer, she believed in the value of what we had to give and put out in the world. In other words, she had to love us intensely. She had to love us intensely. And from the extraordinary love that she showered on every single one of us, we could find the courage to own our voices, to believe that what we had to say was maybe worth it. This is an extraordinary gift, and I think has clearly rubbed off on her progeny, whom it is now my pleasure to introduce, somebody whom I've known for decades, since he was just a little boy. I had a glimpse of who he was as Barbara would regale us with tales of both her remarkable children. I will never forget a story that Barbara told us about Eric, taking him to the MFA as a toddler. Apparently, they were all walking through the Egyptian wing, looking at mummies and hieroglyphics on the wall and on display. And Eric, who was about 5 at the time, apparently began translating them and telling his parents exactly what they meant. Now, I have no idea if this is literally true or not, But I do know that the substance of this is true, knowing what I know about Eric's prowess in this space, his acuity around language, manipulating symbol systems, and manifesting in his own gifts as a poet and translator. I have no doubt of the fundamental truth of that story. I also know that there is no one who could have been more loving, could have taken better care of his mother, of any mother, during this extraordinary and challenging time, and what it posed for Barbara both personally and professionally. It is my pleasure to introduce Barbara's oldest son, Eric Hyett.
Thank you so much. That sounded like a normal introduction. Thank you, Joyce. Yeah, that's true about the hieroglyphics. I was like, anyway, wow. So yeah, today has been an unexpectedly emotionally moving day for me. I don't know why I didn't expect it to be. I just, was so focused on getting this done that I didn't really think about how it might feel. So some acknowledgments are due. First, especially to Joyce Gulhawick and Andrew Cohen for hosting us in their beautiful space. Thank you. And thank you for loving my mom, Joyce, the way that you have for all these years. It's just manifests so beautifully today in everyone's words, and everything comes down to you. Thank you. Really, thank you. People at home who joined in on this unique webinar event, thank you so much on a Sunday. We're going to let everybody go back to your beautiful day. I will say we picked this time, 2 p.m. Eastern, so we could have people on the West Coast USA and here and Europe and Israel, and I'm pleased to say we have all of the above, so thank you all for that and for turning out. This time and the weather, we couldn't have specified the weather. It was just a extra thing. Finally, I'd like to give a few acknowledgments. I want to thank Spencer Thurlow, who has been heading up the Barbara Helfgott Hyett Legacy Foundation. If you go to my mom's website, barbarahelfgotthyett.com, you'll have a contact form, and it'll be Spencer would be the person. So anyone who needs Barbara these days can reach out to Spencer pretty much. He's done a magical job coordinating this. And that said, these are all some things Spencer has put on the calendar for my mom. Upcoming events where my mother will be reading, and I say Barbara, of course, that's my mom represented by Alexis Ivy. As you all heard today, Alexis can read my mom's work with her own flair and in a beautiful way that sort of channels Barbara. I was really moved by hearing that. So here are some upcoming readings if you want to hear the Barb Show presented by Alexis. November 5th, there's Open Doors for the Arts in Weymouth, and Wendy Drexler is actually reading with my mother / Alexis for that one. November 8th, the Newton Free Public Library. Again, Barbara and Doug Holder will be reading. November 20th, this one's close to my heart, the Poemworks Community Reading hosted by Richard Waring. These are usually on a Friday night, but Richard did a special one for us on a Sunday so that I could participate as well. And if you want to read a poem influenced by my mom, that's what the theme is for that event. So it's not so much Alexis reading as people reading stuff that Barbara had some say in, some influence. December 3rd, there's an online event, Lit Balm, at 5 p.m. Eastern. I love the name Lit Balm. And two more to know about. The West Coast, March 5th, 2023, the Bazaar Poetry Salon. That'll be in San Francisco. It'll be my mother. Brittany Perham is the host, and Alexis and me. And AWP, Seattle, Washington, that's the Conference for Poets. That'll be in March of 2023. There'll be a stage reading. So I hope people feel the love and enthusiasm, the fact that somebody who can't give readings is actually giving readings. Thank you to this. And I want to thank Kathy and Richard for their incredible remarks. That pretty much wraps up our event for today. If you have any questions or next step, go to barbarahelfgotthyett.com, fill out the contact form, someone will get in touch with you. And I want to thank you all here in the live studio audience for being so amazing. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our readers. And now, let's eat and drink. And Mary on the keys.